Hey everyone, good morning. Arun Santosh. I'm a principal solution architect specializing in QuickSight. Been with the product for close to 6 years now. I'm very happy to be here and talking to you this morning. So here in today's focus is the NFL use case. NFL has been using QuickSight for several years now. Their primary use case earlier was to do analytics on player stats. They have sensors on the players' suits and it collects tons of information during the events, during the actual games. And all of this gets processed. They have what they call as next-gen stats. They have their own advanced AI modeling, which derives insight from all of these stats. And they use QuickSight on top of all of this for their analysts to derive insights from. That's how they were using QuickSight earlier. And then towards end of last year, last December to be precise, we started talking to them about a more public use of QuickSight. And our primary contacts from NFL team were Mike Band and Keegan Abdu. They are awesome folks, have a ton of knowledge on NFL, everything to do with football. And it was a wonderful partnership from the get-go. So we talked about how to use QuickSight to bring more valuable insights to their fan base as well. And that's where this public facing use cases came about from. So we started off targeting the combine event. So you all know the combine event is where new prospects come in, they go through all the drills during that week's event. And all of these metrics that's collected from those drills are used by the teams in making their decisions as to who to draft for the next year. So it's a very important event for NFL. And I will show you those dashboards that we created for those, but at a high level, going through the agenda, then we'll come back to it. So that's where we started off. And then later on, we also added public use case around the actual draft event. Once we look through the dashboard, I will then focus on the three specific areas that's highlighted in under second point. That's how the button panels were implemented, how one specific dynamic bubble chart was built using Highcharts and a lot of custom calculations. And then how we set up a mock draft pick board. That's more of a fun use case. It's not particularly a BI use case, but it's more of an interactive web experience that we were able to deliver through QuickSight's capability itself. But time permitting, we will cover that as well. So with that, now let's dive in deeper. I will take over the screen share from here and let's look through those dashboards and let's see how these things were built. So what I have up on the screen is the Combine IQ dashboard. And this is on NFL's public-facing site. If you see here, what they used to initially have is the Combine Home and the Combine Tracker. They used to give out details about the various stats for each of these players in this semi-tabular format. And what we were able to do was add an additional tab into their website and embed a QuickSight dashboard, which is much more richer, a lot more interactive, and it gives the fans much more insights into what's really happening, right? So they have this live commentary, which they were updating using our insights. There is this table, and this is the button panel that I was talking about. So they could either see all the data or they could focus on each day's events. It's essentially acting as a filter on the underlying table. And this table itself has got a ton of information about the various scores, the timings from the various drills, and their athleticism score, production score, draft scores, and the player stats like height, weight, hand length, arm length, wingspan, and so on. So that's one part of it. And then we had some historical information loaded for 2023 and 24, but defaulted to 2025 data. They could focus in on the different player groups based on the positions. So whether it's QB or RB, whichever drills were happening as the week progressed, the fans could click on a specific position and see the players in that position compared against each other. And this one is again a table view on which we got a lot of positive feedback. Now it looks as one big sweet table, but it's really a combination of tables here. Folks who are used to building tables and visualizations in QuickSight would be wondering how this was built, right? So it's actually one table which does this bit for the score selection, whichever score we want to pick the top 5 players using. So you can see as I changed from production score to athleticism score, the top 5 players list got changed as well, right? And then this part of it is another table wherein we are having conditional formatting. It's being filtered based on the other selections, and we are showing the player stats. We are having another table up top for the player images, so that it could have been done using same table, but right now with the row sizes, that's a limitation we are having. And this, after we built this is something which we presented back to the product team as well, saying, hey, look at this really awesome table that we built. We had to do this using multiple tables right now, but it would be really awesome if we could do this using 1 or 2 tables. So that's something which it's food for thought for the product team as well, as to how tables are being used and how our existing tables can be enhanced even further. And in here, the radar chart on the right-hand side, that's again being acted upon by these interactions as we change the selections, whichever players are being shown here, we show their data here, visualizing them, right? So again, another question I have got multiple times is how do you get this to work in Highcharts, and how do you get the user images to come up? And that's part of what we will cover in detail under the bubble chart example as well. So, and this is the bubble chart I was talking about here. And again, we have the player listing. We show the top 5 players pre-selected, and they get highlighted here. And you can hover over other players as well and see their images. And the selections can be changed to here, from here. So that's a multi-select interactivity happening again with a table as our input source, and that's filtering the Highcharts on the right. So a lot of complex interactions, but it was all worth it in that we were able to give a really rich and interactive experience for the end user. And this was very well received by NFL fan base. There were a lot of influencers who would write about this NFL combine event. They were all super excited about this new dashboard because it let them see the data in a new light, which they were never able to explore before. So that success led us to think more about using QuickSight for the draft event as well. And we had 2 to 3 months to work on that after the combine event. So again, partnership with NFL, we were able to get them onto the NFL draft version. And this was more of a web text-heavy experience than Combine. The Combine IQ dashboard had a lot of stats, a lot of measures being processed. This was more of text-heavy. In fact, let me flip back to Combine real quick. And there is one more area that I wanted to touch upon here. This processing of all this data was being done real time during the event, and it was being brought into NFL's RDS Aurora instance. And QuickSight was plugged into that. We picked up that information into our Spice layer, which is our in-memory caching layer. And this dashboard was powered from that Spice copy of the data. So that helps with scaling, and this was consumed by millions of users. So that Spice layer helped with the scaling without putting additional load on the underlying infrastructure. We were able to use public embedding, one-click embedding to get this going. So no complex API orchestration needed to be done. This was just the dashboard was built in their account. It was made public, and we were able to just grab the public embed URL from the UI and embed it into their website. As simple as that. So that was an awesome experience. Now, and also the data refresh rate, I should talk about that too here. This was happening in real time. The event was happening and the fan base is excited to see the latest scores, right? So we can't keep them waiting too long. So for the combined event, we were able to get the data refreshed and reflected in this dashboard every 4 minutes. We had the Spice refresh set up to go every 4 minutes. And we did this using APIs. Because as you know, if you're doing it via the UI, it would be a 15-minute interval right now for incremental refresh. But we were able to leverage the API and get a higher frequency refresh packed in there. Of course, there are 24-hour limits on that that you should be aware of, but you can pack higher frequency refreshes into a shorter period of time, as long as the data you are pulling in is small enough that it's able to refresh quickly, right? So you have to also look at how much time it takes to ingest when you're planning your use cases. In this particular case, we were talking about thousands of records, I think, but that was all good to be processed in that 4-minute refresh cycle. So it was awesome. When we came into the draft IQ space, as I mentioned, it was more text heavy, and they needed to be making these updates as the event progressed. And they were using Google Sheets as their mechanism to input all this data. So we had this orchestrated in a way that the data from Google Sheets would be picked up, it would land up in S3, and then it would come into Spice from there. This needed to be even faster, so we had a 3-minute refresh cycle for this, and then it would power this dashboard. Overall, this was also a huge hit. We had millions of users consuming these dashboards and broadcasters using these dashboards while they were covering the events. So overall, pretty successful event and dashboard builds here. So now let's dive into the details. Let's see how some of these were built, right? So for the button panel piece, you can actually access this on Demo Central. Some of you might have seen this already. For others who haven't seen this, if you search for button in the Demo Central search bar, you will get this button panels dashboard. And you can click the analysis icon on the left and bring up the analysis view to see how this was built, right? So we'll look at a couple of instances here. Like I mentioned, we are building the button panel using tables here. So you see here this vertical button panel as well as the horizontal button panel. Both are actually tables. This has 3 columns in this table, and 2 of those are hidden. So that leaves that 1 column with all the product names being visible. And when we click on this, say I'm clicking on Alchemy, that gets selected, and we are showing the data for Alchemy here. Again, conditional formatting happening here. Initially, this top layer says select a product to see quarterly sales. As we click here, that gets hidden, and the underlying chart gets shown. So if I move this, you can see the full chart, right? And so how is this happening, right? How do we make it work using a table? That we are leveraging actions for this. So opening up the table properties and looking under interactions and actions, you can see there is a navigation action being configured on the table. We are saying go to sheet 1, but we are already on sheet 1, right? So it's sort of a workaround. We are just repurposing navigation action to stay on the same sheet, but in the process, we are setting parameter values. In this particular case, we are setting product parameter with the field new product, right? With the field value new product. So let's also expand this table so we can see, bring this to front, and we will show all hidden fields. So we can see the values for that, right? So just refresh this so that it. Okay, so see here right now in the starting state, you'll see when the table is selected, the new product column is all having the same value as the product column. And that new product is a calculated field. It's a quite simple calculation. If I go into edit calculated field, you can see we are just looking at for each row, we are checking if the product value in that row matches what's in the product parameter. If it matches, then we are setting the new product value to X, meaning the use case is if it matches, the customer has already, or the user has already selected that product and they are clicking on it again to deselect it. So we want to deselect it by setting the parameter value to a placeholder, in this case X. And if that's not the case, if it's not matching, then they are clicking there to set or select that product. So we want to have the new product set to the product's value, right? So that's what's happening here. Right now, the parameter is having the value X. So that's why, and let me actually add that someplace here. So just, I can add the parameter value as well here, right? So let's see, pprod. So you can see this is showing up as X. So that's why the new product is matching the product. When I click on here, the action that we configured is going to set the value of that new product, which is alchemy, and it takes it and puts it in the product parameter, right? So I'm clicking alchemy. You can see the value came here as alchemy, and we are using that to now drive conditional formatting to get the button effect, right? So that's done using the selected product calculation, and that's quite easy as well. So it's just checking if the product in the current row matches the product value in the parameter, and if so, set it to 1, else 0. So you saw that whichever row we clicked on, the value came on as 1, and that drives conditional formatting. So we are saying if you're looking at this, the selected product is equal to 1, set it to blue color, right? And that's what's happening here. So it gives us the button effect. Like I mentioned, this is a workaround. Native button panels are something that we have on the roadmap, but till that becomes available, this is an option you have to if you want to build button panels. And this is being driven by a static driver data set, which just has the listing of values that we want to show on the button. And then there, as you click other values, it gets changed, or if you click on something else, or click on the same value again, it deselects it. There is multi-select, limited multi-select as well that you can do from here. If you see here, I'm clicking alchemy, that shows up in the first one, and then the Call Database chatbot plugin, and then it logs me out, and then I have to deselect something and then go click on another one to select it. That's possible. If I want to do a first in, first out kind of a multi-select wherein I select 3, and when I click the fourth one, it just replaces the first one. So Alchemy goes out from the selected list and Contact Matcher came in. And if I click Finance Hub next, Big Old Database goes out, Finance Hub comes in. That's possible as well. And say first in last out mode too. So if I make 3 selections and then I select Contact Matcher, that can replace Chatbot plugin. So whichever is the use case that you want, you could, the calculations would be slightly different to make that happen. And you can explore this on your own. This is a public facing site, and all you need to do is see which fields are here in play, and then you can just open up the calculation from here to see how it's done. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'll keep moving. The next thing I wanted to cover here is the dynamic bubble chart that I showed you earlier. So that one, let's see, I mean, in here, right? So the dynamic bubble chart, this particular one, we will look at how this was built. So in here, this is the analysis view for that particular chart, and you can see we had a dynamic field selection here. So by default, it shows the production score versus the athleticism score, and it plots the players. The top 5 players images show up, the others show up on hover, and you could notice the axis here. So these production scores and athleticism scores, these are NFL proprietary scores, which they calculate. They go on a scale from 50 to 100. So that's what's being shown here. Higher the score, better the player performance. But on the same visual, we also want to show time-based measurements. And this is the time the player took for the 10-yard split. This is the 40-yard time. So in this particular case, the axis needs to be reversed, meaning if they are doing something faster, it's better. So that we want to have the same mode of interpreting this particular visual, that the players in the top right corner are the ones who are standing out, who are performing real well, right? So for that, we need to flip the axis and show the faster players on the top and to the right. So I'll talk about how we did that as well, right? So let's look at this particular chart. This is a Highchart that we used for this one. And we search for all the calculations we are using here. We'll show that here. So the first thing, let's go through the code, the relevant portion here, right? So the x-axis, you can see it has a reversed option that Highcharts provides. And we are making that dynamic. We are getting, using the JSON expression language and picking up the column, the 4th column here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So it starts with a 0 index. So bubble X reversed is what's driving that. And it's a simple calculation. If you look at bubble X reversed, we are plotting only 2 time values there. So if it's 40 time, or if the bubble X title is 40 time or short shuttle, then we want reverse to be true. For everything else, reversed is false. So that's easy enough. And then these titles itself, we are picking from this particular selection that we are making, right? So bubble X title, when we are looking at that, that's a calculation. And we are taking from the parameter selection, and we are cutting it on the verses and taking the first part of it. And likewise for the bubble Y title, right? Deriving from the field drop down itself and taking the second part. So it's all dynamic that way. Just this selection drives everything else. Then likewise, we are having the min and max values for each of these, because like I showed you, the min and max changes, right? So for the scores, it's going 50 to 100 versus rather 50 to 99, I believe. And then for the time and distance, it's different ranges. So we are able to set that dynamically as well using calculated fields that we are bringing in here. And again, you'll see that these are all being picked up from the field wells using the get column. If you're not familiar with the JSON expression language, Demo Central has a starter dashboard for you there, and it takes you through all the details of how you can get started. So let me just quickly show you that too. Here, if you just search for Highcharts, it gives you a pretty detailed view of all of this, right? So you can start with the basics there and then come back and watch this section if you're confused about these JSON expression language expressions here. And then if you see the labels here, we wanted to customize the labels a little bit. So if it's the scores, we didn't want to plot the 100 there. So that's being done here conditionally. And then there is plot lines happening for these dashed lines, which is showing the average values there. And then let's get into the actual bubbles themselves next, right? So similarly, the y-axis is also being plotted. We have the reversed and the min and the max and label customizations being done. We are bringing in the tooltips. So as you hover over, we are showing the player name, the scores in a formatted fashion. For that, we are using the HTML formatted tooltips, which Highchart provides. And then getting to this series, right? One thing everybody is curious about is how does this interaction work? How is it that 5 players are shown prominently here and the others are just these bubbles and then the players show up as you hover over that? So that magic happens here. It's actually, we are having 2 bubble series here. So the first series, let me show you, there are 2 bubble series here, right? So the first series is used to drive the base layer. So in here, you will see the hover is not enabled. So hover enabled is false. That's hover action is disabled on that base layer, and it's getting the data from the field wells. It's displaying the players there. And one particular item that we want to focus on here is the Z value. So if the bubble selected player calc, right? That's something which we are bringing here, bubble selected players, the top 5 players, or rather the players that we are selecting on that table, which was on the left of this visual. We want to show those players in this visual, and that those players will have a value 1 in this calculation. So we are cross-checking that in this case statement. So if the players have this selected calc as 1, then we set Z value as 10, meaning it should be a bigger size bubble. And for everybody else, it's a smaller size bubble, right? So that's one part of it. And then we are having this color scheme. There are players who get this bluish color and then green, yellow, and red. So that's based on the overall score split calculation that comes in. So if that has got the value red, it has got multiple ranges. If you see here in the table below, right? This comes from the data, it's pre-calculated. So you can see it's being put into different categories by their scores, and some are red, green, yellow, blue, so on and so forth. So we look at that and we assign the colors dynamically here within Highcharts. And then the marker symbol itself, right? So if it is a selected player, we want to use the player image. So we are using this get item 4, and that's from this list which we are feeding in. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is the sixth item in our field well on a zero-based index, and that comes to this player image field, right? And I'll show you what's in the player image itself. So focusing on the table below, you can see here, this is a data image in the base64 format. So it's a huge base64 string that's being brought in, and that can be passed in this format: URL, data image, PNG, base64, and then the actual base64 translation of that image file. That can be passed as markers to Highcharts, and that's what's being done here with that. So, and this was being brought in via Spice. We did have to split the fields because of the column. These are really long strings, and it wouldn't just fit in one column in Spice in several cases. So we are actually bringing it split over 4 different fields and concatenating it together in this player image calculation within the analysis. So data coming from Spice being concatenated and then being used to dynamically display the player images. That's how the base layer is built. Now for the top layer, for this part, right, bringing the other player images, getting to show that on hover, it's essentially a similar kind of bubble series here. And this one has got hover enabled. And it's the same, similar data if you see here. But one difference here is we are setting all the bubbles to a higher size. And then the color scheme is the same as before. When we come to marker, you can see the markers are set to a disabled state by setting enable to false. So essentially markers are disabled there. And the symbol, we are setting everyone to the player image, versus in the other one, we had set that only for the selected players, right? Only selected players were using player image. All other players, we were just using circle as the default marker for the base layer. For the top layer, we are using the image for everybody, but it is the marker itself is disabled, so only gets activated when you hover over it, and that's how we are able to get this effect. Okay, so hope that makes sense. So some of the interactions you can get creative like this. Highcharts might not offer it straight as a feature, but then you can have multiple series, hiding and showing, different view on hover, that kind of thing. Okay, so moving on to the next one. Another fun use case was the mock draft pick board, right? I mentioned that this is not a true BI use case here. This just came about from our discussion. The NFL team used to publish a static version of this in the prior years, essentially showing which players they think each of the teams were interested in drafting, and sort of keeping the fans engaged and updated in that way. So we were asked if there is an easy way that they could make this dynamic and let the fans sort of pick and choose and make their mock picks and see how a particular team selection impacts what other teams will do, right? So there is it's purely an interactive experience. There is no actual data or measures that's being shown here. But we just said, yeah, this might be a fun exercise. Let's see if we can make it work with some calculations. And so in here, if you see this first players for the Titans, Cam Ward has been shown as drafted, right? So it's just a mock selection that's set up to show how the player would show up once the team actually picks the player. So if the team picked cam vote would show up in green, and then the users will not be able to make another selection for that team. But let's say the next team, they can just click on Travis Hunter here, for example. And now it sort of shows in blue, meaning that they are thinking the Browns will take Travis Hunter, and now Travis Hunter is turned out in the board, and for the other teams, if they click on Travis Hunter, nothing happens because they already selected it for Browns, and then they can select Abdul Carter for Giants and so on. And you can see here, if you notice this up top, this is sort of exposing how this is being done to sort of let you understand how this is being built. This is the parameter that we are using to drive it, and it's a long string parameter. We are starting off with the value X, and then like we did with the button panels earlier, there is again interactivity via actions happening here. And if you see here, there is a picked player calc, which is being set into the picked players parameter. And we are having that calc here. So picked player calc, and there is a player status numeric, which drives the colors of this display using conditional formatting. So let's start with this particular one right now. And I have just set this to show one player as drafted, right? So sort of to show Cam Ward as in green there in drafted status. And then that's being used in the player status calculation. So in here, if you are saying if a particular player, and each player has an entry for that team. So there is a entry for Titans and Cam Ward combination. And against that, if it's showing up as drafted, then the player status is drafted. And if a player is selected by another team, which is what we are covering in this first condition, right? We should mark that player as not available for other teams, right? So for that, we are doing a sum over calculation, really. So we are saying if the player selection status is drafted, then it's 1. For everything else, it's 0. And then we are partitioning it by the draft target ID. So for a specific player, let's say Cam Ward is being looked at by Titans and Browns and Giants, there are 3 records for that player, and we are doing a sum over across those 3 records and a pre-filter one at that. So if any of those 3 records had this status as 1, then we mark this player as not available for other teams. And likewise, if a team has already drafted a player, then we shouldn't be able to pick other players there, right? Other players in that team should show out as not available. And that here we are accomplishing that by using a similar calculation, but now we are doing a partition against the team. So whichever players are there in that team, has any of those players got drafted status? If so, mark the others as not available, right? And so on. And if the picked player, the team and player combination is there in the picked player's parameter, then we marked as picked. Otherwise, we mark as if that draft target ID is already being picked somewhere else, we mark as not available. If none of those conditions is met, then the player is available. So you can see here, as I click Travis Hunter, that got added in here, and we can, let me just duplicate this visual to this sheet and show you the hidden fields there. Now we are coming up on time, or in fact just a minute over time, but Maddie, if it's okay, I'll take another 5 minutes to cover this bit so that.
Yep, totally fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, so let's keep going and show hidden fields on this one. So these ones we are not interested in. So let's hide those just to keep us focused. Okay. So you can see here, by default, the parameter is starting off with a default value of X. And that's what's showing here. For cam board is already selected by somebody else. So it's shown up as not available, which is driven by the player status 0. So if it's a player is not available, we are essentially setting the same parameter value as original. So in this case, it's X now. So we are setting X again. So if you click on cam board, nothing really happens because you're setting the same value into the parameter. But Travis Hunter is currently available, right? So if somebody clicks on Travis Hunter, we want to add that to the picked player list. So that's what's showing here under the picked player calc field. And when I click on Travis Hunter, this value will get set into the parameter that goes here. So you can see that happening, right? And then if I select somebody else, if I select, say, Mason Graham from the same, under the same team, I just want to swap these players, right? Because each round you get to pick one by default. So we were keeping it simple, just that each, not considering trades and such, but every team gets to pick one player. That was the scenario we were chalking out here. So if I click on Graham, then you can see here the new value that goes would replace 816230 with Graham's ID, right? So, and that drives the conditional formatting that shows Mason Graham as being selected. And then you can go across as well. So as you add more, the string keeps getting bigger. And then we are able to do conditional formatting on each of those. This was a fun build, and it was built as like one visual here, right? And then it's duplicated. If you look at the filters, it all comes down to planning ahead and making sure that your data is set up right, because you don't want to be building 32 different tables and doing all of that by hand. So in this particular case, we planned it out so that we are creating the one table first. You can see it has got the draft order filter set to equals 1. And then as we are just duplicating that and changing the filter on it for the next one, right? So in here, the draft order equal to 2. So that's essentially the only change we had to make for that particular table when we duplicated it. So overall a fun experience, not truly a BI use case as I mentioned earlier, but fun with calcs, I would say.